In this video, we're going to talk about graphs, primarily going to look at vocabulary, and we're going to look at this concept called rate of change. This particular little group of problems starts off by saying, take a look at the graph on the next page. And when you print this out, it does actually show up on the next page by itself. But on mine, I have to scroll all the way down to page 3. There it is. Here is the graph they are referring to. Okay, so this particular graph we're going to refer to for these first few problems, and then we have 2 more graphs we're going to look at and answer some questions. So they'll start with some vocabulary here. First thing they mention is that we always have a title that's prominently displayed. In this case, we do on ours. Population having attained at least basic education by region from 1870 to 2010. And we're kind of just look at this basic information. We see the different regions in the world that they are looking at and kind of going from there. Okay, so sorry about that. So most of these graphs have 2 axes, a horizontal axis, which is sideways near the bottom, a vertical axis, the up and down one on the left. And they mention that, of course, axes is the plural of axis. So the axis should be titled. What is the title of the vertical axis on this graph? So I'm going to scroll over to that. And on this particular graph, my vertical axis here on the left says share of population aged 15 and older that attended formal education. So I'm going to put share of population that attended formal education. I won't include the parentheses, but you can. I'm just not going to because when I write, it's so much bigger than most people. So share of population. Of course, I forget what it said. Sorry, scroll back down. Share of population that attended formal education. There we go. That attended formal education. I think I'll have to stick that below. I don't think I have enough space. Okay. The horizontal axis doesn't have a title. Why do you think a title wasn't included? All right, so let's take a peek. So sure enough, there's no title under there, but it's very clear that they're talking about years. And they mention that in the title of the graph, right at the top, population having attained at least basic education by region 1870 to 2010. So they kind of mentioned that it's by date. And so since it's said in the title, and it's really easy and obvious that that's what the x-axis is in this particular problem. So it was mentioned in the title of the graph. And I think especially when we're talking about years, a lot of people, when they see that, probably would have assumed it was years, even if it hadn't mentioned it in the title, but you really should. I mean, there are examples where you might use the number 2010 and it not being referring to a year. So, but they did mention it in the title of the graph, so that's how we kind of knew. All right, each axis has a scale. Scale refers to the numbering system used to order the axes on the graph. It's important that they have tick marks and are consistent. So the scale on the horizontal axis can be described as the years 1870 to 2010 in 20-year increments. Now I want to pause here because that's not true. So I was looking at this graph previously, and you'll see that the first 2 years is not 20 years. That's a 10-year increment. And same with the last 2. So I kind of found that funny that they bothered saying with exact certainty that it's consistent and that ours is 20-year when it's not consistent and ours actually has 2 that are 10-year. The reason they said that is they want it so that you know if you were to make a graph, you should make it consistent. That's really what they're trying to get at. So for our class, if we ever create a graph, which I'm not saying we're going to do anything like this, but if we were to create a graph, we would want to use a consistent spacing between our tick marks. Now, they did, you'll notice, kind of actually space those 2 closer together than they did the rest of them. So that's good. Visually, we can kind of tell that It's not really a 20-year period, but you do notice, and here's where the graph does kind of do it correctly, that these kind of like vertical lines that come off of 1880 and 1900 and 1920 and 1940, all of those vertical lines are spaced at 20 years, and they don't have vertical lines at 2010. And then it's kind of implied that it's not at 1870. So that does kind of give us the correct spacing. Okay. So then it says units, so forth. So in this case, the numbers are from 1880 to 1900 and so on. The units are in years, and in this case, the increment is 20 years. So what are the numbers, the units, and the increments for the vertical axis? Okay, so the vertical axis is kind of implied here, what it's representing. So first of all, it's going from 0 to 100. And the minute I see 0 to 100, especially because we've been talking about percents, it makes me think percent. And it kind of makes sense in this problem that we're talking about the percent of the population that has had formal education. So yeah, it's referring to percentages, and that makes sense with the fact that it's titled share of the population. And it's going by tens. Okay, so I will put that the numbers themselves are 0, 10, 20, and so on, all the way to the 100. And so I did the ... just to kind of imply, I don't want to write them all out. I mean, we could, but I don't want to. So those are the numbers. The units are percents. And the increment is it's going by 10%. It's jumping by 10 every time. All right. This graph is showing the growth in education levels for many different areas of the world simultaneously. The legend above the graph, just below the title, tells us the global region represented by each color line on the graph. You can view this. Okay, that last sentence is not true. This is for, this was written for a different college, so we're just going to ignore that. Okay, how do we know that the graph that attained of at least basic education is growing in almost every region? Okay, well, this kind of feels self-evident, but what they're trying to get us to say is, okay, we know they're all growing because literally the graphs themselves are climbing as they go to the right. In math talk, we would be saying that these graphs are increasing in value the further to the right we go. That's how we verbally describe that we know every single region is increasing in value. Nobody decreases. You see that? Not one time was there a jump down. There are some areas where it kind of flattens, where there's no growth. Like right here, I see this area flattens out. Over here at the top, these regions kind of flatten out when they hit near 100, right? Yeah, but they're all increasing in value all the time with the exception of some flat regions. So let's go ahead and state that. How do we know that they are growing? All of the graphs increase in value as we move to the right. Really what that means is the percents are increasing as the years are progressing, but that's okay. Visually, this is what we're seeing. That's how we know. So attainment of basic education is not growing in Western Europe in the last 20 years or so. How is this depicted on the graph? Why are basic education levels constant in this region? So I kind of pointed that out just a second ago. But Western Europe, that's the green one here. So that's this one. And if I follow, I see that it kind of hits this, boop, right? It hits this point where it starts flattening out because it looks like it actually achieved 100%. All right. It looks like it's just a little bit below in 1980, but probably hits there very close to 1990. And they kind of imply that in the way they asked this question. So in the last 20 years or so. And so the answer is it's depicted. So the first part of the question, it is depicted. Wow, that's a weird dot there. It is depicted by a flat line, or you could say horizontal line, a flat line. My T is kind of sad looking. There we go. Is depicted by a flat line. And then why is it constant? Well, that's because it's constant since it reached the maximum. It's constant since it appears that 100% has been obtained and kept. All right. One region saw rapid growth and attainment of basic education between 1910 and 1940. Which region? Explain how you can tell. Okay. So looking from 1910 to 1940, and I apologize again for my dog barking in the background. So let's see, okay, so you can kind of tell. There is one country or region, I should say, that grows very rapidly, more than any other region, and that's this little stretch right here. From here to here, it like is very steep, how rapidly it's increasing. And that is 1910 to 1940. So that particular region is Eastern Europe. And so let's write that down. So they asked, first of all, what the region was. It's Eastern Europe. And then explain how we can tell. Well, it is the only region, which is the only region to have such rapid growth. And by rapid, I'm talking about how it's a steep incline from 1910 to 1940, but really it's the only steep incline on the whole graph. By how much did the attainment of basic education increase each year for the region in question 6? And let's approximate the rate of growth. So each year, meaning, okay, so approximately how much does it grow? So to do this, we're going to look at what the starting point appears to be and then the ending point. So let's see. Starting point's right about there. And I'm going to do my best without a ruler, but if you have it printed off, I definitely get a ruler and kind of draw this out. I'm going to kind of, there we go. Best I can. All right. To me, that's a little bit below 40, right? So, but it's bigger than the halfway mark, which would be 35. So maybe I'll say like 47 or so, 47. I'm sorry, 37 or so. So I would say that's about 37%. That's its starting point in 1910. So it looks, oops, sorry, 1910, it's starting at 37%. I'm not going to put the percent just because they aren't putting percent. And then for 1940, here, let's go back and take a look at that. 1940, the end point here. All right, so maybe around in there. Okay, a little bit below the halfway mark, maybe 94% or so. And I'm approximating. You could say it's 95 if you wanted. You could have said that the other one was 38. I don't know, but we're approximating and that's okay. So I'm just kind of grabbing loosely what I believe the numbers are. Okay, so if I wanted to know how much it's growing each year, first thing I should probably figure out is how much it jumped, what the actual jump in percent is. So let me subtract these two and grab your calculator because we're going to use it. So pause the video if you need to go grab it. 94 minus 37 comes out to 57. So it was a 57% increase. Wow. And to find out how much it increased approximately each year, since this was a 30-year period, so this is the increase for a 30-year period, what I would do is divide this by 30. So 57 divided by 30, that comes out to 1.9. So that means I'm saying that this is about a 1.9% increase here. Percent increase per year. And they define right below us what rate of change is. you take the amount of change over the amount of time. So the amount of change is exactly what we just did here. We took the last amount minus the first amount. That's what I just did right here. And then I took that number and divided by the amount of time that has passed. All right. So that's how we, in general, find rate of change, which is one of the concepts we're going to focus on in this section. And there's my answer here. Okay. So what is the rate of change attainment of basic education for the world from 1910 to 1940? So we're going to kind of like compare them, right? What happened in Eastern Europe versus the world. All right, so let me go and erase some of my markings here. Okay, so in this graph, the world is represented as the dark blue, which is like right here. Right? Following me? Okay, dark blue. That's what we're looking at. So the dark blue region then, and I'm going to kind of zoom in a little here just so we can kind of see it. They're very close. Eastern Europe and the dark blue region are very close. So right here, it's just a tiny bit below. And if I were to kind of come over here, maybe I'll just say instead of 37%, I'll say 36 or 35, whichever you feel most comfortable. I'm going to go with 36. I feel like it's still a little bit above the halfway mark. So in 1910, I'm going to say it's 36%. But it doesn't grow nearly like the other one. In 1940, sorry, let me make sure I see 1940. There we go. 1940 is right here. In 1940, I might be a little too high. There we go, drawing that out. Okay, I would say maybe 47 or 46. Let's go with 46. It's pretty close in terms of where it's located. So 1940, 46. Okay. So for these two, it's only a 10% increase for the world over that 30-year period. So if I divide 10 by 30, that comes out to 0.3% increase each year or per year. I think that's how I said it last time, but it's, you know, each per same idea. All right, moving on. So now we have a different graph we're going to work with. This time we're looking at daily smokers in 5 different countries, which they've labeled to the right. That looks like 6 different countries to me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe they meant outside of America. I don't know. All right, let's look at what they ask. What is the graph communicating? Be specific and write at least one sentence. Okay, so for this, it looks like we're tracking. And since we're talking about millions, yeah. So we're tracking in the millions how many people are smoking in these countries, men and women, and they're even including all ages. So that's interesting, right? Even teenage smokers. And this is, by the way, from 1980 to 2012. Okay. So it looks like they're tracking how many people in the population are smoking for 22-year period. No, 32-year period. Wow. Okay. So the graph is communicating a number of daily smokers. Wow. Daily smokers in different countries from 1980 to 2012. All right, which country has the greatest number of daily smokers? Okay, well, that depends. Greatest number of daily smokers now or greatest number of daily smokers then? So now Indonesia has the greatest number of daily smokers. So we'll go ahead and assume they mean now. So currently, Indonesia. Which country has seen the greatest increase in smokers, and let's estimate the amount of increase. Okay, so an increase, well, again, Indonesia, they increased from, that looks like it's less than 25 million, so maybe like 24 million, all the way up to, let's say, 50, well, I'm trying to kind of, maybe 53 million. So it went from 24 million to 53 million. So again, Indonesia, and they went from 53 million from, what did I say? I think 24. Yeah, 24 million. So I'm approximating that increase to be 29 million. And then what is the rate of change over that time period? So I went from 1980 all the way to 2012. So that 32-year period. So I'm going to take 29 over 32. And I get an increase of 0.90625. Okay, so what that represents is a millions. That's how many millions, 0.9 million. 0.9 million, another way of saying that is like 100,000, 900,000. Okay, so here, we're going to go ahead and I'll estimate it just to be 0.9 for ease. Okay, so 0.9 million new smokers per year. That's intense, almost a million. Which country has seen the greatest decrease of daily smokers? Estimate that amount. Okay. Okay. It looks like the United States has the biggest decrease, right? Because it started the highest, ends the lowest in terms of that decrease amount is big comparatively. I mean, Brazil and Germany, there's not a lot. Japan has a decent little decrease, maybe about a 10 million decrease. And then, but Russia kind of started to decrease and then went back up. So yeah, United States is definitely the biggest decrease overall. So for them, so it's the US. Wow, they didn't give us much space to write that, did they? The US, and that decrease, it goes from, we could go from the highest point if we wanted to, and it looks like each dot is representing another year. So this would be 1980, 1981 is the second dot, 82, 83. So it looks like 1983 was a max. So from 1983 to 2012, which is a low. So 1983, I'm going to go ahead and say that's about 53 million. Looks like the same as what I said Indonesia was, right? About 53 million. And then in 2012, that looks like maybe 48 million or so. So we're going to say it goes from 53 to 48. Oops. 53 to 48. And that'll give us, oh, did I do that wrong? I sure did. I said 48 and I should have said 38. My bad, right? 30, it's below 40 million. Oh, just kidding. 38. 53 to 38 million. Sorry if I confused you. Probably wasn't sure why I was saying 40 instead of 30. Okay, so that's 15 million. And for this country, what is the rate of change in that period of time? So we'll take our 15. And in this case, we said it was from 1983. Yeah, 81, 82, yeah, 1983 to 2012. So let me subtract those two. 1983 to 2012 is a difference of 29 years. So 15 divided by 29 comes out to 0.5. Now we're talking about a decrease. So 0.5 million decrease per year. That's awesome. All right. There is another quantity that isn't represented in this graph, which would give us a little more perspective on these numbers and what is it. So I've been kind of thinking, and I hope you have too, how do we know how much of the population is really being talked about here, right? So the thing that we're not discussing is how much this represents of the whole population. And that would have been nice information. Are they comparing these places because these just happen to be the people with the most smokers in their countries? Are they comparing these places because the populations are relatively close? That's information that would have been nice to know. So the thing they didn't tell us was the actual population information for each country. And I think that would have been really helpful information for us to do some comparing. So the population, or let's say total population, let's be specific. The total population of each country would have been nice. Oops. What was being measured in each country? The total number of smokers. And it might have been nice if they, instead of the total number of smokers, maybe they talked about the percentage of the population that smoked. That might be really nice information to know and would make it more reasonable for compare. Because, I mean, Germany looks like they're doing great, but what if Germany's population, what if that represents over half, right? Like, what if that's representing over their half their population, but this is only representing a quarter of our population? We can't tell. So percentages would have been a better way of comparing this information. Okay, let's come back here. Sorry, new graph. What is being measured in this graph? Okay, so they're actually going to kind of make us look at it and figure out what's being talked about here. So first thing I'm noticing is the axes on the left is per capita number of cigarettes smoked per year. So they're actually talking about the amount of cigarettes smoked per capita. What that means is per which is really per person, is kind of a way of thinking of that, per person. Okay, so and then we have years going on here, 1900 to 2012. And what we're seeing is that the number of cigarettes smoked per year is increasing all the way up. We have World War I, we see the Great Depression, and then we see a drop off after the Great Depression, probably people not being able to afford it as much. Then it starts steadily increasing again to World War II. Then we get to 1964, and for the first time, we have some people wondering if this is actually healthy. And the Surgeon General came out and was like, yeah, it's not good to be smoking. So we start to see a slow decrease. They start to advertise, see that, broadcast ad ban, because they're worried that, you know, knowing that people should know this is bad for their health and still not quitting kind of made them worry that the smoking ads were still encouraging smoking, and they started to not allow them to do that anymore. Non-smokers' right movement begins. People who aren't smoking were kind of getting fed up with people smoking causing damage to their own health. Federal cigarette tax doubles, so the government starts charging more tax, and wow, then we see a big drop. People are not willing to pay the money any longer. Now they start talking about secondhand smoke, you know, just being near people who smoke is dangerous to your health. Then the Sinar Amendment Act, I'm not certain what that is. You could look it up and see, but we can kind of see that from here on out, we start having lots of things happening that are kind of affecting. We do see one thing, the cigarette price drop, right? So cigarette prices drop in order to kind of maintain their group of people who want to continue smoking. You know, taxes had been increasing, and so they dropped the prices to try to keep people in smoking. But man, it has been a steady decrease since. Okay, so it is looking at the smokers. What is being measured in this graph? The amount of smokers. Amount of smokers, and this is definitely in the US, from, what was the starting date? 1900 to 2012. All right. What does this graph communicate to you? that we had an increase, or smoking increased from 1900 to 1960 approximately, and then began to decrease after that when health and finances were affected. Now, it wasn't really the health of the smokers, because when they saw that smoking affected them, right? The Surgeon General's warning, it didn't, I mean, it dropped a little, but then it like increased again. A lot of people started feeling like, well, it's my health and I'll do what I want. But what really began to be an issue was that it wasn't just one person's health. When you're smoking, you are affecting others. And that's where the next few years started heading, right? This kind of idea that, well, if you're going to possibly kill somebody else from your habit, you're not just affecting your own health. You affect your families or anybody who's near you that's inhaling your smoke. So during which years was the per capita cigarette consumption increasing? Well, definitely from 1900 up until 19, wow, that's hard to see. I wish I had a ruler. 1900 to like 1919 or so. And then it started increasing again from 1920 to 1930. And then it started increasing again from maybe 1933 to maybe 45. So during which years did the per capita cigarette consumption increase? Well, several periods. So I'm going to go ahead and say, even though there were drops, really it was all the way from 1900 up until 1960 or 63 or so, right? I mean, really, that's where it was increasing approximately 1960. I'm sorry, 1900 to 1963. But there were some periods where there was drops. I mean, definitely we had the Depression and then the war and then the war again. And then we actually saw some evidence linking it to cancer right there. And it still increased. It was a little bit of a drop off there, but it still kept going up. Okay. Like I said, most people, wasn't about their own health that it really started to become a problem. It was about when it was affecting other people's health. Finances, though, seems to affect it a bit too. Find the rate of change and increase over those years. And then let's write it down. Okay. So in 1900 here, I'm going to put those two numbers down, and then 1963. So we're going to approximate the low and that high. So in 1900, it looks like if that's a 500, then let's see, halfway, that's about 250 right there. So I'm going to say maybe 75. I think it's safe to say maybe 100 or 75. Let's just say 100. No, yeah, we'll just say 100. We're approximating. So 100 per capita. And then in 1963, it climbed up to, I'm sorry, the computer got mad at me for touching the screen while it was thinking. Okay, I'm going to kind of try to draw that over. It looks like less than that, huh? Okay, so maybe if that's 4,000, that's 4,500. So maybe 4,400. Okay, so here, yeah, I knew it was going to be mad at me for what I wrote. It didn't like it that I moved. Okay, we said 100, and we're going to say this is about 4,400. Okay, so let's subtract those. That's going to be 4,300. And then this was for a 63-year period. Okay, so I'm going to plug this into the calculator. 4,300 divided by 63, and I am getting 68.2. So it increased per year by 68.2 cigarettes per year. All right. During which years was the per capita cigarette consumption decreasing? All right. So now we're going to look at from 1963 to 2012. Really, it's been decreasing that whole time. I mean, there was a little jump up, but that's okay. So from 1963 to 2012. Find the rate of change over those years. Okay, so we're going to use our 4,400. Oops. Sad looking 4. Sorry. I'm trying to make it a little more like a 4. There we go. And then for 2012, we'll go ahead and approximate that one. All right. Ugh, try it again. All right. So that line, it's definitely below that. So that's definitely near 1,000. And this is 1,500 right here. So I'm going to say, because that, as you can see, it's below where I drew my red line, right? So it's not 1,250, maybe 1,100. We'll just say about 1,100. Okay. So subtracting those two, that'll give me 3,300. And then from 2012 to 1963, that is a 49-year period. So dividing 3,300 by 49 on my calculator, I get 67.3. So we would say, and let's word it the way they did, the number of cigarettes smoked per person per year decreased by 67.3 cigarettes per year. And obviously not every person's smoking, right? They're taking all of the smokers and they're dividing how many cigarettes they're buying over the amount of people in our population. So it's almost like, you know, when you see 100, they're saying that the cigarettes that are being smoked represent about 100 cigarettes smoked by every person in the population. That's what that says. All right. And there we go.